Hello, hello, hello. Hi, Reza.
Hey,
Welcome to
hey,
the fourth episode of Future Forward. How do you feel?
hey, Seyi. Excited to do it. Number four. My God, we're official.
We are, we
We have like
are.
a web page with the episodes stacking up. This is awesome.
It is. And the episode this week is going to be about the future of energy, but with a focus on electricity. For those of you who are listening to us for the first time, this is the Future Forward podcast. We're bringing all of you, our listeners, into the conversation Reza and I have been having for a few years now, almost every Friday. It's about the future of cities, and we look to the past, the present, and provide some strategic foresight about where we think the future will be.
Yeah. I'm really excited about this one, Shay. I mean, you and I, like our first jobs were at utilities. I mean,
Yes,
utility that I worked at was both electric and water, but electric part of the utility really dominated just because that's where all the money was. So
yes,
it's kind of like where I grew up. It's kind of where
it
I learned
is.
how to work, how to be an adult, and learn all the dynamics of the utility industry.
Yep.
So yeah.
Same, same. I'd had some jobs until I started working at a power station in on the east side of London. And, it's pretty much defined my career, interestingly, similarly. So been excited to dive into this one for the last
Yeah,
few weeks.
yeah. So Shay, let's start with the history. Tell us a little bit about electricity, kind of where it came from, what we can share with our listeners of about what we can learn from that history.
Yeah, no, thanks, Reza. Yeah, I'll frame it from the inventions that sort of defined the
Hmm.
industry. So I'll start with 1800. Alessandro Volta invented the first battery, which is allowing us to continuously produce electricity and store instead of the immediate use, which is the typical use case. About 31 years after him, Michael Faraday discovered electromagnetic induction, which is essentially the core requirement for what we now know as the electric generator that we have across our cities. And everyone's favorite inventor shows up around 1879, Edison, when
Mm.
he invented the light bulb, which is a key component here because it allowed us to extend daytime essentially and use up more energy to live our lives. And around the early 19th century, Edison and Tesla were fighting the big DC direct current versus Nikola Tesla's AC current. And one individual who never gets mentioned in this battle, who was actually quite critical, is an industrialist called Westinghouse. These inventors made the inventions, but Westinghouse was one of those the JP Morgans of the era who put money behind scaling the technologies.
Mm.
And in the spirit of Westinghouse is who I frame as the father of modern electric utilities is
Mm.
Insul,
Mhm.
who aggregated a bunch of small electric generation, storage, and consumer use and brought it into the centralized utility, which is still existing today. Those I'd say were the like 4 or 5 entities that brought us to the modern electric grid that we know today.
Hmm. That's so cool. There's like one thread in there that I want to pull, which seems tangential, but I think it's a thread that's salient to how we talk about community in relation to everything that we talk in future forward, and it's about this. With energy and electricity came the invention of light, and so we could instead of being constrained by the day, we could extend the day. And so let's take a look back in time when there wasn't light, and
Mm.
what were communities like the story comes from uh, a book, Brothers Grimm's Folk Tales, and I was out thrifting with my daughter. She was at a Goodwill in Phoenix, Arizona, and I usually go in there, try to find a book, and sit down while she shops. And so I was just looking around the bookshelf. I found this Brother Grimm's Tales, and I pulled it out, and I was reading the introduction. And what the introduction was talking about, where these tales come from. It came from storytellers in each village
Mm,
that would tell stories at the end of the day by the time, because there was no light, and those storytellers were like the entertainment. But not just that, they were transmitters of culture and values.
mm,
Through those stories, people would learn what is morally right, how to be a good human in the world.
mm,
And it's interesting that with the invention of light, storytellers went away, but we have
mm.
new storytellers in this world, with radio and TV and now social media. I don't know if I would call that storytelling, but it is still like we transmit culture and values in different ways. But it started with electricity, allowing us to change the mode of how stories are told and culture is transmitted. So I think that's kind of like an interesting part of what happened with when electricity was invented.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad. Thanks so much for sharing these stories that always bring it back to the core of what we're trying to talk about. How is technology changing our cities? How is it changing our cultures?
Yeah,
And consequently, it turns out light,
yeah,
electricity is a big part of the change of culture. And
yeah.
I'll also sort of touch on two books that provide some of the context that I uh, just shared here. The Empires of Light is the one that talks about the Tesla, Edison, Westinghouse battle. Deb Chatra's How Infrastructure Works, which is a fantastic book. I hope we get her on at some point, actually. How Infrastructure Works is where the framing for electricity, light, buying us more time to live our
Mm,
days. Um, and I do think, even as we come to today, that element of culture, electricity, and use of energy still plays out in how people are responding to our electric grids today.
yeah. So Shay, take us into today. I mean, I'll make one comment before you get into
Please.
this, but it seems like, the structure of the electric utility hasn't changed much. I mean, there still are power generators, there's transmission lines and distribution lines, and like how that whole sort of infrastructure works hasn't quite changed. So tell us about where we are and maybe some of the themes that are coming up.
Yeah, no, it's a good observation. It hasn't changed much, and we seem to be living in a time sort of on the cusp of some massive change. The point I made earlier about Insul centralizing the grid, and for the
Hmm.
most part, we're still generating electricity at a certain point in the city and then distributing it over long distances. And three trends that we're experiencing today are sort of changing that centralization dynamic. And those three trends are decentralization, which is what I'll call micro generation, closer to the end user in smaller capacity. So we're not building the huge several thousand megawatt plants in one place to then move across. We're now building a bit more micro. The second trend is decarbonization, which is us starting to use renewable generation sources, so solar, hydro, wind, and some other forms of renewable electricity. Because what Insul unfortunately saddled us with was a lot of fossil fuel usage,
Mm,
which we're now trying to wean ourselves away from because of climate change and the impacts on our communities and cities. And the
yeah.
third connected trend here is digitization, which is smart grids, smart metering, sort of a two-way flow of information between the generator and the consumer to better manage demand and supply. So decarbonization, decentralization, digitization.
Interesting. So let me pull a couple threads over there. So it seems with, we talked a little bit about decentralization in the last episode where I, mentioned Terraform Industries and how that allows, their power source to be sort of not sort of central. But I thought your comment about, when electricity was invented and what came about with Insul and them was like an unintended consequence. I mean, made a choice with fossil fuels and didn't realize the unintended consequences of how much it would scale and what impact it would have on, the world and our communities with climate change. So I think that's an interesting note. Maybe you comment on that, and I'll bring up like a second point that I think is interesting.
You're very correct. It's we've been quite extractive in the use of the fuel for the energy, and Insul wasn't thinking about it. Insul, Westinghouse, industrialists who just saw an opportunity to power the world essentially, and what could they burn but the fuel that was available, and where the generation I'd suggest that is now having to sort of change that at a scale that is a bit daunting but possible.
I think that's the case for any new technology or tool. As humans, we don't understand the unintended consequences, and I'm sure like in future episodes we're going to touch about other technologies that are so prominent in our day-to-day with AI and stuff, and not understanding its unintended consequences. But that's for another episode. The second thing I think, Jay, that I sort of want to poke at a little bit. I mean, you and I worked at a utility, many years ago, and there was talk about like digitization and smart grids and smart meters and smart this and smart that, and I just like as a consumer, I can't see what it's done for me. And there was so much talk about it, but maybe not in a way that sort of thought about the end user. So what's with that there, Shay?
Yeah, no, you are again, you pull these threads that are super insightful. The way I frame it is that the big mistake we made about the smart grid and the idea of the smart grid was even calling it smart in the first place. We shouldn't have. We called it the smart grid, started having conversations with consumers like yourself to use it, and we very quickly started to make people feel dumb. Unfortunately, because now we're placing them on the other side of this new thing that is seemingly smarter than they are, and no surprises, the communities rejected it. It's a shame because fast forward to sort of today with the advent of decentralized energy, so solar, batteries at the home scale, you can get individuals to participate in this two-way exchange with the grid. I do think we should rename it, even if we continue to pull it forward there.
Yeah. So Shay, you're like a prosumer. This is like front and center, the solar and batteries and paying attention to all this. So tell us a little bit about that, because I'm a normie. This is not sort of really front and center in my world, but I talk about your experience with it, and I have like sort of a comment around it.
Yeah, no, I'll just share a little bit about my experience because I do think it ties into a few of the trends. So yes, we do have solar batteries and the whole smart grid infrastructure in our home. And what it's enabled me to do differently than the initial iteration of the smart grid is that in Austin, Texas, we generate more electricity from our solar panels than we use during the summer. It's been the case for the last 7 or 8 years that we've had the combination of infrastructure in our home. And I sell back the excess. I store some, sell back the excess to the grid, and I get a credit for anything I sell to the grid at a price that in some months during the summer, I am getting a credit on my bill. I'm not paying to use electricity. So that is when the whole smart grid and the digitization of the smart grid actually works. The utilities have sort of failed to position it properly, because this occurs at my individual scale. But I remember last summer, some of the Bitcoin miners who use up a ton of electricity here in Texas were making more money off either shutting down some of the electricity use or selling power to the grid. They were making more money off that than the Bitcoin mining they were doing. It's crazy.
Yeah. First thing, Bitcoin, like, that's a whole nother,
whole
a
other
bunch of
show, actually.
internet casino, according to me.
Yes.
But that aside, it's interesting that, so what I think is interesting there is this digitization has actually set us up to enable this decentralization and decarbonization. And I think it's the right time because, again, I'm a kind of a normie on this, not a prosumer. I was in Costco yesterday. I was walking through Costco, and at one of the booths, there was someone there that was talking about solar panels and battery, a rechargeable battery system, and it piqued my interest because I've talked to you about, like, I feel like there are more outages, and I believe it's true. With these storms, and I mean, just last week we had this weird storm. A tree fell in our neighborhood, cut off power for 2 hours. Inconvenient, but there have been greater inconvenience with the snow apocalypse 2 years ago, and other power outages. But I'm less interested as a prosumer, but I'm more interested as someone who wants to sort of alleviate this anxiety I have about, like, these storms and these issues that come up. And so I think the word you use, Shay, is resilience. I care about resilience. And so I want solar power and a battery to weather, no pun intended, the storms that we have and the outages that come about from it.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
It's a really good, you again, you're touching on why those trends are sort of coming to the fore, and the combination of those trends. About 10, 12 years ago or so, some work out of google.org, working with some utilities, and they had this product called OHM, I believe, OHM. And the research showed that 1 out of 100 people would be sort of a prosumer like myself. And prosumer just means you're almost like a professional consumer. You pay attention to the details. And even though I consider myself a prosumer, I've met some folk who are just on a different level. They've been tracking their energy usage at a level of granularity that spreadsheets was what they were using when we didn't have smart meters. That would be 1 out of 100 people. 9 out of 100 will sort of pay attention. You would fall into that 9 because you check your bill. If there's an outage, you sort of understand what's going on, or you reach out and find out about it.
I look at the app. I check where the outage is, when it's going to come back. I'll submit into the app, like, hey, we're having an outage and what time it occurred. So
Exactly. So you would be in the 9% or the 9 out of 100, and then the 90 will just not engage with the utility. But for the utility, it's always been a situation of 99 out of the 100 people you serve interact with you either when they're paying their bill or when they have a problem, which is absolutely horrible as an entity that is supposed to be serving consumers. The current state of you paying attention really just boils down to you now have a need to secure power for your home because of how critical it is for what you do. We find ourselves, I had outages at the same time as well as you did for different reasons, but tied to the storms that were happening.
Yeah. So Shay, let's I think this is a good segue into the future. You
Yeah.
brought us to the present, we've looked at these trends, and I'd like, project forward, like where are we going?
Yeah, so it's an interesting time because as we've just sort of identified, those three trends are converging and
Mm,
converging the point where there's a ton of innovation and innovation activity going on, which always excites me. So I have a few notes on areas of innovation that will sort of define our future. But I want our listeners to recognize that every single one of these examples are sort of bringing together either all three. In the case of
mhm,
Terraform last week, it's actually bringing together all three of
mm,
the trends we just mentioned. And there are a few others that bring together two um, of those trends. And so I'll start with one of the areas that a lot of money is going into right now, which is nuclear energy
mm.
generation. And
Interesting.
yeah, and the reason for nuclear, I'll get a little nerdy here. Most cities, most utilities have a baseline amount of energy that they have to provide to the businesses and individuals that are within their coverage region. And what that means is a baseload requirement of energy generation. Fossil fuels have been the best source of baseload coal. Just keep
Mm,
dumping coal in and you will get your baseload energy generation. But as we decarbonize,
yeah.
which means we're moving away from coal, solar, hydro, wind sort of provide us less assurance of baseload due to their
Mm,
intermittence. So nuclear is how the industry is thinking about replacing that baseload of coal. There are two areas of nuclear energy: fission, which is the splitting of heavy atomic molecules. It's currently expensive and you have to do it at scale. But some of the innovation coming in right now is around modular, smaller fission reactors. A company called OKLO, and another one called Terrestrial are sort of at the forefront of those two. And then the second area of nuclear is fusion,
mm.
which is the opposite of fission, which is trying to combine molecules, which is the power of the sun and the stars. So everyone is excited about it because it can provide us renewable energy forever, essentially. And the part of me that loves advancements in technology, somewhere in there also lives a realist. I'm an
Mhm.
optimist, but there's also a realist. And so far, fusion, we've struggled.
Yeah.
Fusion is immense amount of heat in a reactor that we are yet to find materials, naturally occurring or synthetic materials that can achieve the activation we need. So you need 10 times the output of energy as the heat you put in to achieve fusion.
Well,
We're not
we're not
there.
there.
We're not
Yeah.
there. And
Well,
it's expensive too.
well, my normie take is, to be a little glib. I feel like, if it's like taking the sun or the stars and trying to bring them to Earth to make them work here, and
Literally.
yeah, that just seems. Yeah, I'm not a physicist. It just seems like it's a stretch. And
Yes.
I just feel like it's been so many years that people have been going at fusion, and kudos to them for keep trying. That's human ingenuity and drive. But I haven't seen the breakthroughs. In fact, whatever breakthroughs have come about have been like fraudulent. So that one, I agree with you. I don't know. I wouldn't bet money on it. And then go back to fission. Our nuclear reactors today. I think the biggest challenge, Shay, there, for our communities is this fear of nuclear power because of what happened with Three Mile Island and Chernobyl and Fukushima, there's this whether or not nuclear is safe, and it probably is safer than what most people realize. There's this fear that nuclear disaster is invisible almost. It was like a fear of COVID too. It was like it was this invisible thing that that made people sick, and radiation is this invisible thing, and you don't know, you can't see it. To know that it's affecting you. So I think the industry has to get over that. If that industry wants to thrive and continue to drive forward with more nuclear energy coming online, I think it's going to have to overcome how we feel about it.
I 100% agree with you. I actually think the psychological barrier is a bigger one than the technological on the fission side, because and I say we, industry technologists, optimists, techno-optimists, or whatever you might call, we forget that this sentiment of feeling safe in where we live, or safe in the knowledge that we will still be useful or relevant, which is the fear we have of AI right now, for example, those are bigger barriers to get over. They almost, these companies almost need to start going on these massive PR campaigns, even in advance of their technology getting deployed.
Yes, spot on. Psychological barrier, couldn't put it any better.
So another one of the examples of innovation coming up as the industry moves forward is around distributed energy in the form of like geothermal. You mentioned Terraform last week, and there are a lot of companies trying to sort of modularize solar storage at a scale that can then be used to serve smaller areas beyond this decentralized approach. So in this case, it's not as much new technology. It's the combinatorial innovation, for example, to help serve different use cases. And I'm excited about that, because if you think about it, that's really what's going on in like my home, for example. But now how can we bring those solutions to serve smaller nodes, which are more resilient than the centralized node that we have existed under for the last 100 or so years.
Yeah, that's interesting. And Seyi, I think there's like one other one that you're most excited about that really pulls all these threads together. We were talking about it a little earlier before the episode, so I can't wait to hear about it. So, tell us about it.
Yes, so it is a company, and I've since found out there are a few the Chinese are also spending a lot of money on this, but the company that brought this to mind for me was a company called Vitrus Solis. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And what they're doing is using robots to build solar arrays in space or near space, transmitting the energy captured, because the solar array in near space means we have energy from the sun 24/7.
Right.
Using millimeter wave technology, also a proven technology, to transmit that down to Earth and storing that energy on Earth to be used whenever and wherever it is needed.
Interesting. Yeah. So that's super interesting. I think I'll make two comments, and you can tell us a little bit more about this. Like, one, robots in space. That already scares me. What are these robots going to do? Sorry, I have to do that. And two is millimeter wave technology, sort of coming down to Earth. Is going to be like, oh my God, my cell phone is creating, is making me get brain cancer. So what will this do to me? Because I can't see it and I don't know what it's going to do. So I think that's going to be some of that barrier that might have to overcome.
It is. I love that you always bring the perspective of, hey, how will people, communities think about this, even as we just march forward and deploy technologies? The thing that I'm a super fan of this solution because
Yeah.
again it's the combinatorial innovation, and what really makes it super interesting for me is that this company is taking the three ideas that we started this episode with. So
Hmm.
batteries from Volta,
Okay.
millimeter wave technology, which is the transmission of energy in using a method that Nikola Tesla was working on, which made everyone think he was crazy. Uh, just the generation of electricity back to Faraday and Edison. And they've just taken these three fantastic ideas and combined them to serve the need we have today. That is just innovation as far as I'm concerned. I'm excited
Wow.
about it.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's amazing. I love this. I love this example because this is like what we love to do in our episodes. Is like take what has happened in history and bring it forward. Like history,
Yes.
this history is informing what we can do in the future. And we
Yes.
had discovered those things. We just hadn't used them in the right way and
Yes.
combined them into the right way. And now, we've advanced enough, or we have a situation that calls for us taking advantage of this type of technology and potentially solving these big problems that we have with how we use energy to generate electricity
Yeah.
today.
Yeah. I totally think so. It's companies like this that excite me, make me excited about the future of the industry, because it
Yeah,
does feel like taking the lessons of history to
yeah,
chart a path for the future, which is
yeah,
always awesome in my opinion.
yeah. Yeah, and Shay, we have to ask our listeners, because this is what we do every time. Like, please tell us about other technologies that we haven't talked about, or other companies that you've encountered, or other approaches to
Yes.
addressing, what is happening in the future with electricity. We'd love to learn with you. Tell us where we've been wrong, because we don't mind being wrong, because
We
that's
love
how
it.
we learn. So yeah, I'm curious to learn a little bit more, and see if in the next mailbag we have someone that gives us something that we can learn from.
Oh, yes, yes. And speaking of mailbag, we come to this week's mailbag, which comes from a friend of mine who is enjoying the podcast and asked me a question that I'd like you to answer, Reza. He
Hmm.
asked me, "Why are you guys doing this? Why are you and Reza doing this?"
That's so funny, Jay, because a friend of mine that I saw for coffee a couple of days ago, he asked me the same question. It's
That is
funny. There was,
awesome.
yeah, joint mailbag here. I would say like just curiosity. Like that's the first thing.
Yeah,
We're just incredibly curious about this topic. We want to use that curiosity to learn, and we want to learn with the rest of you. And I think that's like for us, we just enjoy being curious. I mean,
yeah,
I just look forward to these conversations every time,
same.
because we're just having a good time learning together and trying to understand where things are going. So yeah, great question. Keep those questions coming.
Yes, yes. And so the next thing for us here is to make our asks, Reza, as we round
Yeah,
up the show. What are your
yeah,
thoughts about subsequent episodes? I will offer that because energy and electricity is such a broad topic, we're
yeah.
only going to um, keep diving into this in more detail. That we will
Yeah, I
absolutely
feel I
do.
feel
Yeah.
that I feel that way too, Shay. I think we just scratched the surface. We just touched on one aspect of this. I can't wait to sort of dive a little deeper and sort of explore a little bit more about energy.
Yes.
Yeah, our ask, Shay, is that you know um, uh, if you're enjoying the show, obviously like and subscribe or rate and review us. But that's not but that's not all. Like we're very much we like to connect with people, and so if you enjoy the show and you know another friend that will enjoy it, take a minute to share the show with them and ask them what they think, and keep ask them to share it with someone else, because we know
Yes.
that word of mouth is really powerful. We know that being able to have a conversation about this type of discussion with your friends and your community, I think will help us all explore how we can sort of go into the future in a better way. So please share.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thanks so much for listening. This has been a fun episode for both of
Yes.
us, and I hope you've enjoyed it as well. Till
Yeah.
next
Thank
time.
you, everyone. Yeah. We'll see you.
Bye.
Bye.